I walked through my apartment door after another grueling 12-hour shift, managing the dinner rush at Romano's Italian kitchen, my shoulders aching and my mind already focused on collapsing into bed. What I found instead was my mother standing in my living room like she owned the place, gripping the handles of two oversized pink suitcases that definitely weren't mine. Behind her stood my 26-year-old sister Ashley, wearing that smug expression I'd grown to despise over the years. "Sweetheart, meet the new owner of your apartment," Mom announced with the kind of authority that made my blood freeze. "I'm taking your bedroom for your sister, so throw all your stuff out of there immediately." Ashley stepped forward and hurled her leather jacket directly at my face. The zipper caught my cheek, leaving a sharp sting. That's when I smiled and calmly said, "Welcome home, Ashley." 3 years ago, I signed the lease on this one-bedroom apartment in downtown Springfield after graduating from community college with my business management degree. The place wasn't much to look at back then. Scuffed hardwood floors, outdated kitchen appliances, and a bathroom that desperately needed new tiles. But it was mine. Every month, I scraped together $950 from my salary at Romano's, where I'd worked my way up from busboy to assistant manager. Those early days were brutal. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning to open the restaurant, work until 3 in the afternoon, then rush to my second job stocking shelves at Miller's Hardware until 11 at night. 7 days a week for 8 months straight, just to prove I could make it on my own. While my friends from high school were living in their parents' basements or crashing on couches, I was building something real. Mom used to brag about me to her church friends. "My Jimmy works so hard," she'd say with genuine pride, paying his own rent, buying his own groceries, never asking us for a dime. Dad would nod approvingly when I visited for Sunday dinners, telling me how much he respected my independence. Ashley, meanwhile, had dropped out of Springfield Community College halfway through her second semester. She moved back into her childhood bedroom and spent her days sleeping until noon, binge-watching reality shows and going out to clubs with friends who somehow always had money despite not working. When family gathered for holidays, Ashley would complain about how unfair life was, how nobody understood her struggles, how she just needed time to figure things out. I never said anything. Family harmony mattered more than pointing out the obvious double standard. Everything changed 18 months ago when Dad suffered his massive heart attack. I remember getting the call from Mom while I was prepping vegetables for the dinner service. Her voice was shaking so badly I could barely understand her words. "The doctors say he needs surgery immediately," she sobbed. "The insurance will cover most of it, but we need $8,000 up front for the specialist." That night, while Dad was fighting for his life in intensive care, and Ashley was posting selfies on social media asking for prayers, I drove to First National Bank and applied for a personal loan. My credit was decent, my employment history solid, and the loan officer approved me for $10,000 at 12% interest. I never told my parents where the money came from. When Mom asked how we'd manage the medical bills, I simply said I'd handle it and asked her not to worry about the details. Dad's surgery was successful, but his recovery took months. Physical therapy medications, follow-up appointments with cardiologists. The expenses kept mounting. I quietly covered what insurance wouldn't, working extra shifts and selling my car to buy a cheaper one just to keep up with payments. During this entire period, Ashley continued living her carefree lifestyle. She got a part-time job at a local boutique that paid minimum wage for 20 hours a week, but she spent more money on clothes and makeup than she earned. When family members asked how she was helping with Dad's medical expenses, she'd vaguely mention that she was doing what she could and changed the subject. I discovered the first lie 6 months ago. I was visiting my parents for Dad's birthday dinner when Ashley casually mentioned to our cousin Sarah that she'd been splitting the apartment rent with me. "Jim and I each pay half," she said confidently. "It's only fair since we're both adults now." The statement hit me like a physical blow. Ashley had never paid me a single dollar toward rent, utilities, groceries, or anything else related to the apartment. Yet here she was, taking credit for financial responsibility she'd never shown. I pulled Ashley aside after dinner and confronted her privately. She rolled her eyes and laughed. "Oh, come on, Jim. I was just trying to sound more mature in front of Sarah. It's not like it matters." But it did matter. Over the following weeks, I started paying closer attention to Ashley's conversations with family members. She consistently implied that she was contributing to household expenses, supporting Dad's recovery, and sharing financial burdens. Our relatives praised her for stepping up during a difficult time, while I remained silent to avoid family drama. The situation reached a breaking point 3 weeks ago when I received a phone call from my landlord, Mrs. Rodriguez. "Jim, I've been thinking about your living situation," she said in her thick Boston accent. "Your sister Ashley stopped by yesterday with some very interesting information about your rental arrangement." My stomach dropped. "What kind of information?" "She showed me bank statements proving she's been paying half the rent for the past year and a half. She also mentioned that she's interested in taking over the lease completely since she's more financially stable than you right now." I was speechless. Ashley had somehow created fake bank statements and convinced Mrs. Rodriguez that she'd been my equal partner in maintaining the apartment. Worse yet, she was positioning herself to take over my home entirely. "Mrs. Rodriguez," I said carefully, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Ashley has never paid any portion of the rent. I can show you my bank records proving I've made every payment myself." There was a long pause. "Jim, I've known your family for years, and I trust Ashley wouldn't lie to me about something this serious. She seemed very concerned about your financial struggles and offered to take full responsibility for the lease to help you out. Maybe it's time to let her handle things." That conversation ended with Mrs. Rodriguez agreeing to consider transferring the lease to Ashley if she could demonstrate consistent payment ability over the next month. I hung up the phone feeling like the ground was collapsing beneath my feet. The twist I didn't see coming was discovering that Ashley had been dating Marcus Rodriguez, Mrs. Rodriguez's 28-year-old son, for the past 3 months. Marcus worked part-time helping his mother manage her rental properties and had significant influence over her business decisions. Ashley had been using their relationship to gain access to information about my lease agreement and to position herself as a more reliable tenant. When I realized that my own sister had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to steal my apartment through lies, manipulation, and romantic manipulation of our landlord's son, I felt a level of betrayal that cut deeper than anything I'd experienced before. The person I'd been protecting and supporting had been plotting against me behind my back, using my kindness as a weapon to destroy the life I'd worked so hard to build. The next 2 weeks became a nightmare of psychological warfare disguised as family obligation. Ashley moved into my bedroom without ceremony, claiming she needed the space for her clothes and furniture. She hung blackout curtains to block the morning light I relied on for my early work schedule, installed a sound system that pumped bass through the walls until 3 in the morning, and rearranged everything to suit her preferences. I found myself sleeping on my own couch, setting my phone alarm to vibrate so I wouldn't wake Ashley when I left for work at 4:30 in the morning. The apartment that had been my sanctuary became a hostile environment where I felt like an unwelcome guest. Ashley's friends began treating my home as their personal hangout space. Madison, a loud blonde who worked at the same boutique as Ashley, would arrive uninvited with bags of takeout food and spread the containers across my coffee table without offering to share or clean up afterward. Trevor, Ashley's high school boyfriend, who'd never held a steady job, would park himself on my recliner for hours playing video games on my television at volumes that made conversation impossible. When I politely asked Ashley to establish some ground rules about guests and noise levels, she laughed and said, "Jim, you're being ridiculous. This is my apartment now, and I can have whoever I want over whenever I want. If you don't like it, you're welcome to find somewhere else to live." My groceries began disappearing. The sandwich meat I'd bought for work lunches vanished overnight. The carton of eggs I'd planned to use for breakfast was empty by Tuesday, even though I'd purchased it on Sunday. When I labeled my food with my name, Ashley accused me of being petty and selfish. "We're family," she said with mock hurt in her voice. I can't believe you're hoarding food like we're strangers. But the psychological manipulation was nothing compared to what I discovered when I started investigating Ashley's claims about paying rent. I spent hours reviewing my bank statements, gathering proof of every rent payment I'd made over the past 3 years. Every transaction was clearly documented with my account information and Mrs. Rodriguez's deposit records. Ashley's fake bank statements were surprisingly sophisticated. She'd used photo editing software to alter screenshots of online banking transactions, creating the appearance of monthly rent payments to Mrs. Rodriguez. The amounts matched my actual payments perfectly, and the dates were staggered to look like we'd been alternating responsibility month by month. When I confronted Ashley about the forgeries, she didn't deny it. Instead, she shrugged and said, "I needed Mrs. Rodriguez to trust me. Sometimes you have to be creative to get what you deserve." "What you deserve?" I repeated, incredulous. "Ashley, this is my apartment. I've paid every cent of rent for 3 years. And now it's time for someone more responsible to take over," she replied coolly. "Face it, Jim. You're barely keeping your head above water financially. I'm doing you a favor by taking this burden off your shoulders." The conversation revealed a level of entitlement that shocked me. In Ashley's mind, she wasn't stealing my apartment. She was rescuing it from my incompetence. She genuinely believed that her lies and manipulation were justified because she deserved a better living situation than I did. But Ashley's scheme went deeper than fake bank statements. I discovered she'd been intercepting my mail for months, steaming open envelopes and resealing them so carefully I never noticed. She'd found the documentation for my personal loan, including the monthly payment amounts and the original purpose of borrowing $10,000 for Dad's medical expenses. Armed with this information, Ashley had crafted a narrative that painted me as financially irresponsible and potentially dishonest. She told Mrs. Rodriguez that I'd been hiding debt problems and might not be able to continue paying rent reliably. She suggested that my loan payments were evidence of poor financial planning and that I might be using credit to cover basic living expenses. When Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned these concerns during a follow-up phone call, I realized that Ashley had been building her case against me for months. Every piece of private financial information she'd stolen had been weaponized to undermine my credibility and position herself as the responsible alternative. The most devastating discovery came when I checked the bank account I'd established for Dad's ongoing medical expenses. I'd been depositing $50 every week into a savings account earmarked for his medications, physical therapy copays, and regular cardiology appointments. The balance should have been over $2,000. Instead, it showed $43.18. I printed out the transaction history with shaking hands. Over the past 4 months, Ashley had been making withdrawals using Dad's debit card, which she'd apparently convinced him to give her for emergencies. The money had funded shopping trips to Target, dinners at upscale restaurants, purchases at Sephora and Victoria's Secret, and cash withdrawals that left no paper trail. Ashley had stolen nearly $2,000 from our father's medical fund, while simultaneously positioning herself as his caring daughter and me, as the financially struggling son who might not be reliable enough to maintain an apartment lease. When I confronted her about the stolen money, Ashley's facade of superiority finally cracked. Her face flushed red, and she stammered through a series of weak excuses. "Dad said I could use the card for family expenses," she claimed. "Those purchases were for things we all needed. Ashley, you bought a $120 perfume and charged it to Dad's medical account. How is that a family expense?" I needed to look professional for job interviews. She shot back, her voice rising defensively. "You work at a boutique selling clothes to teenagers." "What job interviews? Shui." The argument escalated until Ashley finally screamed, "You know what, Jim? I'm tired of pretending to be grateful for your help. You act like you're some kind of saint, but you're just a restaurant manager who's never going to amount to anything. At least I have ambition." Her words stung, but they also revealed something important. Ashley wasn't just stealing my apartment and Dad's money. She was trying to destroy my sense of self-worth to justify her actions. In her twisted logic, I deserved to be betrayed because I wasn't ambitious enough, successful enough, or important enough to merit respect. That night, as I lay on my own couch listening to Ashley's friends laughing loudly in what used to be my bedroom, I realized that my sister had been waging psychological warfare against me for months. Every lie, every manipulation, every cruel comment had been designed to break down my confidence and make me accept her version of reality. But Ashley had made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated my ability to fight back when pushed too far. The person who'd worked 2 jobs to pay for his own apartment, who'd taken out a loan to save his father's life, and who'd quietly supported his family through their worst crisis, wasn't going to surrender his home without a battle. The question was whether I could expose her deception before she succeeded in destroying everything I'd worked to build. Ashley's transformation from manipulative sister to outright apartment dictator happened with breathtaking speed. 3 days after our confrontation about the stolen medical money, I came home from work to find that she'd changed the locks on the bedroom door. My key no longer fit, and when I knocked, Ashley called out sweetly, "Sorry, Jim, but I need privacy. This is my space now." All of my personal belongings, clothes, books, photo albums, my grandmother's jewelry box that held my few valuable possessions, were trapped inside a room I could no longer access. When I demanded the new key, Ashley shook her head with mock sympathy. "I think it's better this way," she said, examining her manicured nails. "You can use the hall closet for your work uniforms. Everything else can go in storage until you find your own place." The hall closet was barely 3 feet wide and smelled like mothballs. It couldn't hold even half of my belongings, which meant Ashley was essentially forcing me to abandon most of my possessions or pay for storage I couldn't afford. But Ashley wasn't finished establishing her dominance. The next week, she presented me with a handwritten rental agreement demanding I pay her $400 monthly for the privilege of sleeping on my own couch and using the kitchen and bathroom. The document was written in Ashley's curly handwriting and included restrictions on when I could shower, how long I could occupy the living room, and which shelves in the refrigerator I was permitted to use. "Since you're going to be my tenant now," Ashley explained with false cheerfulness, "we need to establish some basic rules. $400 is actually a bargain for downtown Springfield. Most people would charge you at least $600 for this kind of arrangement." I stared at the paper in disbelief. "Ashley, this is my apartment. I'm not paying you rent to live in my own home." "Actually, it's not your apartment anymore," she corrected, pulling out her phone to show me a text message from Mrs. Rodriguez. "The lease transfer is being finalized this week." Mrs. Rodriguez was very impressed with my financial responsibility and my mature approach to handling the transition. The text message confirmed my worst fears. Mrs. Rodriguez had agreed to transfer the lease to Ashley based on the fraudulent bank statements and Marcus's recommendation. I had 7 days to remove my belongings and find new housing or face eviction proceedings. My stomach twisted as I realized how completely Ashley had outmaneuvered me. While I'd been working 12-hour shifts and trying to maintain some semblance of family harmony, she'd been methodically destroying my life from multiple angles. The situation at work began deteriorating as well. I'd always prided myself on my professionalism and reliability at Romano's, but Ashley's campaign of destruction had followed me there too. Several of my coworkers mentioned hearing concerning rumors about my personal life. "Hey, Jim," said Danny, one of the line cooks I'd known for 2 years. "I heard you've been having some family drama. Ashley stopped by last week and mentioned you were going through some tough times financially." My blood went cold. Ashley came to the restaurant. "Yeah, she seemed really worried about you. Said you'd been struggling to pay your bills and that your family was trying to help you get back on your feet. She asked if we'd noticed any changes in your behavior or work performance." Danny's words hit me like a physical blow. Ashley had visited my workplace specifically to plant seeds of doubt about my reliability and mental state. She was preemptively discrediting me in case I tried to expose her lies to people who knew us both. I discovered the full extent of her workplace sabotage when my manager, Tony Rodriguez, no relation to my landlord, called me into his office for an unexpected meeting. Jim, I need to ask you about some concerns that have been brought to my attention. Tony said, his usually friendly demeanor replaced by professional distance. I've received some information suggesting you might be dealing with financial problems that could affect your job performance. What kind of information? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Someone who claimed to be a family member contacted the restaurant and expressed concern about your mental state. They suggested you might be under extreme stress due to debt problems and family conflicts. They recommended we keep a close eye on you to make sure you're still capable of handling your responsibilities. The anonymous family member was obviously Ashley, but I couldn't prove it without sounding paranoid or defensive. Tony's questioning made it clear that my job security was now in question, which would make finding a new apartment virtually impossible. But Ashley's most devastating attack was still to come. I discovered it when I applied for a car loan to replace my aging Honda Civic, which had finally broken down beyond economical repair. The loan officer at Springfield Credit Union ran my credit report and frowned at his computer screen. Mr. Thompson, I'm seeing some concerning activity on your credit report. You have 3 credit cards that were opened in the past 6 months with a combined balance of $14,800. All 3 accounts are currently past due. I felt the world spin around me. That's impossible. I don't have any credit cards except my bank debit card. The loan officer showed me the screen displaying 3 accounts: a Chase Freedom card with a $6,000 balance, a Capital One Platinum card with $4,800 charged, and a Wells Fargo Cash Rewards card with $4,000 in purchases. All 3 were in my name using my social security number and my apartment address. Someone has stolen my identity. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. That's certainly possible. The loan officer replied sympathetically, but these applications were approved based on income verification from Romano's Italian Kitchen. Someone provided detailed information about your employment history, salary, and work schedule. They also had access to your personal information and banking details. Ashley had used her knowledge of my job and her theft of my mail to open credit cards in my name. She'd been living off stolen credit for months while simultaneously positioning herself to blame me for the debt when it was eventually discovered. The credit card statements, which I requested by phone that afternoon, revealed Ashley's shopping spree across Springfield's retail landscape. Hundreds of dollars at clothing stores, expensive dinners at restaurants I couldn't afford, spa treatments, jewelry purchases, and cash advances that funded her lavish lifestyle. Each fraudulent purchase was another nail in the coffin of my financial reputation. My credit score had plummeted from 720 to 460 in 6 months, destroying my ability to rent a new apartment, buy a car, or qualify for any kind of loan. When I confronted Ashley about the identity theft, she didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she smiled coldly and said, "Prove it." Ashley, I have the credit card statements with purchases that match your bank deposits. I can show that you've been using cards in my name. Can you? She asked with mock curiosity. Because I think what you can show is that someone in our family has been irresponsible with credit, and that person is trying to blame their sister for their own poor financial decisions. I think what you can show is a pattern of lying and manipulation by someone who's desperate to avoid taking responsibility for their mistakes. Her words chilled me because I realized she'd prepared for this confrontation. Ashley had already crafted a narrative that would turn my accusations against me. In her version of events, I was the unstable family member who'd stolen credit cards and was now trying to frame her out of jealousy and desperation. You know what the beautiful thing is? Jim, Ashley continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Even if you could prove I used those cards, you'd also have to explain why you never reported them stolen. You'd have to admit that you knew about the charges for months and did nothing to stop them. What kind of responsible person allows $14,000 in fraudulent charges to accumulate without contacting the credit card companies or the police? She was right, and she knew it. My delay in discovering the identity theft, combined with my access to the statements and my family relationship with Ashley, would make it difficult to prove I was an innocent victim, rather than a willing participant or negligent cardholder. Ashley had created a situation where exposing her crimes would also expose my own apparent incompetence or complicity. She'd trapped me in a web of lies so complex that extracting myself would require destroying what remained of my reputation and family relationships. As I sat on my own couch that night listening to Ashley and her friends celebrating their successful apartment takeover with expensive wine purchased on my stolen credit, I realized that my sister wasn't just stealing my home and money. She was systematically destroying my entire life while positioning herself as the responsible family member who was helping her troubled brother. The question was no longer whether I could stop Ashley's scheme. The question was whether I could expose her betrayal before she succeeded in framing me for her own crimes. The phone call started at 6 in the morning. Capital One's automated system cheerfully informed me that my account was 90 days past due and that immediate payment of $2,400 was required to avoid legal action. Chase followed at 6:15 with a similar message about my overdue balance. By 7 o'clock, Wells Fargo had joined the chorus of creditors demanding money I'd never spent. I sat at Romano's prep counter during the morning shift, trying to focus on chopping vegetables while my phone buzzed with increasingly threatening messages from debt collectors. My hands shook as I diced onions, partly from exhaustion and partly from the growing realization that Ashley's identity theft was about to destroy more than just my credit score. "You okay, man?" asked Carlos, the head chef, noticing my distraction. "You look like you haven't slept in days." I hadn't slept properly in weeks. The couch that served as my bed was too short for my 6-foot frame, and Ashley's nightly parties made restful sleep impossible. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the psychological torture of watching my life disintegrate while everyone around me believed Ashley's lies. "Just some family stuff," I mumbled, focusing on maintaining the steady rhythm of knife work that kept my hands busy and my mind occupied. "Family stuff can be tough," Carlos said sympathetically. "My sister went through a rough patch a few years back. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you the most." His words hit closer to home than he realized, but I couldn't risk explaining the situation. Ashley had been so thorough in her character assassination that any attempt to expose her would sound like the desperate accusations of someone trying to shift blame for their own failures. The breaking point came that afternoon when Tony called me into his office for the second time in a week. This time, he wasn't alone. Seated across from his desk was a woman I'd never seen before, wearing a professional suit and carrying a leather briefcase. "Jim, this is Sarah Mitchell from our Human Resources Department," Tony explained. "We need to discuss some serious concerns about your employment status." Sarah opened her briefcase and pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. "Mr. Thompson, we've received multiple reports about your financial instability and its potential impact on your work performance. More concerning, we've received a complaint alleging that you've been verbally threatening and potentially dangerous toward family members." My mouth went dry. What kind of complaint? Sarah consulted her notes. "The complaint was filed by someone claiming to be your sister. She provided detailed documentation of threatening text messages, described incidents of aggressive behavior, and expressed concern that your financial stress might lead to workplace violence or theft." "That's completely false," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. "I've never threatened anyone, and I've never stolen anything from this restaurant." "The person who filed the complaint anticipated that you would deny these allegations." Sarah continued, her tone professionally neutral. "She provided audio recordings of several conversations in which you allegedly made threatening statements toward family members." Ashley's trap was springing shut around me. She'd recorded our private conversations, edited them to remove context, and created evidence that I was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. The woman who'd stolen my identity, my apartment, and my father's medical money had now positioned herself as the concerned sister, trying to protect others from my alleged violence. "I'd like to hear these recordings," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Sarah played 3 audio clips from her laptop. In the first, my voice clearly said, "Ashley, I swear I'm going to make you pay for this." In the second, I was heard saying, "You have no idea what I'm capable of when someone pushes me too far." The third recording captured me saying, "I'm going to destroy everything you think you've built." Each statement was something I'd actually said during our confrontations about the apartment and the stolen money, but Ashley had edited out the context that made them legitimate expressions of anger rather than threats of violence. Without the surrounding conversation, my words sounded like the rantings of someone planning to harm his sister. "Mr. Thompson," Tony said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "I've known you for 3 years, and this doesn't sound like the Jim Thompson I've worked with. But these recordings are very concerning, especially combined with the reports about your financial problems and erratic behavior. Tony, you have to understand," I pleaded. "My sister has been manipulating this entire situation. She's stolen my identity, taken over my apartment through lies, and now she's trying to get me fired to complete her destruction of my life." Even as I spoke the words, I realized how paranoid and unstable they sounded. The Jim Thompson that Tony had known was reliable, professional, and emotionally stable. The person sitting in his office making accusations about elaborate family conspiracies seemed like a different person entirely. "I'm sorry, Jim," Tony said, avoiding eye contact, "but we have to take these allegations seriously. You're suspended pending a full investigation. We'll need you to turn in your keys and name tag." The walk from Tony's office to the employee parking lot felt like the longest journey of my life. 3 years of building my reputation, proving my worth, and advancing my career had been erased by Ashley's calculated campaign of lies. The job that had given me purpose and stability was gone, destroyed by audio recordings that turned my legitimate anger into evidence of dangerous instability. My phone rang as I sat in my car trying to process what had just happened. The caller ID showed my father's number. "Jim, we need to talk," Dad said, his voice strained and tired. "Your mother and I just had a very disturbing conversation with Ashley about your behavior lately." "Dad, whatever Ashley told you isn't true. She's been lying about everything. Son, she played us recordings of you threatening her. She showed us documentation of debt problems you've been hiding from us. She's genuinely afraid of what you might do next." The recordings had reached my parents. Ashley had convinced them that their son was mentally unstable and potentially violent, while positioning herself as the victim who was bravely trying to help her troubled brother. "Dad, please listen to me," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "Ashley has been stealing money from your medical fund. She's opened credit cards in my name and destroyed my credit. She's taken over my apartment through lies and fraud. I can prove all of this if you'll just give me a chance." There was a long pause before Dad spoke again. "Jim, your sister warned us that you might make these kinds of accusations. She said you've been talking about conspiracy theories and blaming her for problems you've created yourself. Son, I think you need professional help." The conversation ended with Dad gently but firmly telling me that I wasn't welcome at family gatherings until I sought counseling for my anger issues and financial irresponsibility. My own father, the man whose life I'd saved with a personal loan I was still paying off, believed Ashley's version of events over mine. That evening, as I sat in my car in an empty parking lot because I couldn't bear to return to the apartment where Ashley was celebrating her victory, I received a text message that revealed the final phase of her plan. "Jim." The message read, "I know you're upset about losing your job, but it's for the best. I've been talking to Marcus about your situation, and he has some ideas about how you can start over with a clean slate. We're willing to help you, but first you need to admit that you've been making some poor choices and accept responsibility for the mess you've created. Once you do that, we can work together to rebuild your life the right way. Love, Ashley." The text was accompanied by a photo of Ashley and Marcus standing in my former bedroom holding champagne glasses and smiling at the camera. In the background, I could see my grandmother's jewelry box sitting on Ashley's dresser, the contents presumably redistributed to suit her taste. Ashley's message revealed the true scope of her manipulation. She wasn't just stealing my life. She was positioning herself and Marcus as my saviors, the generous family members who were willing to help their troubled relatives start over. The narrative required me to accept blame for Ashley's crimes and express gratitude for her willingness to assist in my recovery. The alternative, as Ashley well knew, was continued escalation of her campaign to destroy my reputation, my relationships, and my future. She held recordings that could be edited to support any accusation she chose to make. She had access to my personal information that could be used for further identity theft. Most importantly, she had convinced everyone who mattered, my family, my employer, my landlord, that she was the responsible party and I was the problem. As I sat in that parking lot watching the sunset over Springfield while my phone buzzed with more calls from debt collectors, I realized that Ashley had created a situation where surrender seemed like the only rational choice. Fighting back would require me to prove a negative, that I wasn't the unstable, financially irresponsible person she'd painted me to be. It would mean convincing people who already believed her lies to reconsider their judgments based on evidence that could be dismissed as the desperate fabrications of someone trying to avoid accountability. But Ashley had made one critical miscalculation. She'd assumed that destroying my external life would break my internal resolve. She'd believed that losing my job, my apartment, and my family's trust would force me to accept her version of reality and submit to her control. Instead, sitting in that car with nothing left to lose, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: clarity. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't trying to preserve what I had or minimize damage to family relationships. I was free to focus entirely on exposing the truth, regardless of the consequences. Ashley had taught me that sometimes the people closest to you are capable of the deepest betrayal. Now, it was time for me to teach her that sometimes the person you underestimate is the one who fights back the hardest when they have nothing left to lose. The Springfield Public Library became my headquarters for what I privately called Operation Truth. Every morning at 8 o'clock when the doors opened, I claimed the same computer terminal in the back corner where I could work without being observed. For the first time since Ashley's campaign began, I had something she didn't expect: time focus, and nothing left to lose. My first priority was documenting every lie Ashley had told and every crime she'd committed. I created a detailed timeline starting 18 months ago when Dad's heart attack gave Ashley access to his medical fund. Using my own bank records and the credit card statements I'd requested, I built a paper trail that clearly showed the pattern of theft and fraud. The credit card applications provided crucial evidence. I called each company and requested copies of the original applications, claiming I needed them for identity theft reporting. What I discovered was, damning. Ashley had used my employment information, social security number, and personal details with surgical precision. She'd even forged my signature using handwriting samples she'd copied from birthday cards and family documents. More importantly, the applications included phone numbers and email addresses that Ashley had created to impersonate me. When the credit card companies needed verification, they'd been calling numbers that Ashley controlled. She'd been intercepting all communication about the fraudulent accounts, which explained how she'd managed to use the cards for months without my knowledge. But Ashley's most critical mistake was underestimating my understanding of technology. During our confrontations, I'd noticed that she always kept her phone nearby and often seemed to be recording our conversations. What she didn't realize was that my apartment's thin walls and her habit of talking loudly meant that many of her private conversations with Marcus and her friends were audible from the living room. I began recording those conversations using my phone's voice memo app, keeping the device hidden but positioned to capture clear audio. Over 2 weeks, I gathered hours of material that revealed Ashley's true character and intentions. In one particularly damaging recording, Ashley was heard bragging to her friend Madison about her scheme. "Jim thinks he's so smart, but he has no idea how thoroughly I've planned this. I've been collecting information about his job, his finances, his personal life for months. By the time I'm finished, he'll be so discredited that no one will believe anything he says about me." Another conversation captured Ashley discussing her relationship with Marcus in terms that made clear she was using him for access to the apartment lease. "Marcus is useful for now, but he's not exactly boyfriend material long term. Once I have full control of the lease and Jim is out of the picture, I'll probably need to find someone with better career prospects." The most shocking recording came when Ashley's friend Trevor visited, and they discussed their plans for my stolen credit cards. The beauty of using Jim's cards, Ashley explained, is that even if he figures out what's happening, he can't prove he didn't authorize the purchases. We're family, we live in the same apartment, and I have access to all his personal information. Any lawyer would say it's a domestic dispute, not criminal fraud. Trevor laughed and responded, "Plus, you've got those edited recordings that make him sound psychotic. If he tries to cause trouble, you can always claim he's having a mental breakdown and making false accusations." These recordings proved that Ashley's crimes were premeditated and ongoing. She wasn't simply taking advantage of opportunities, she was systematically planning the destruction of my life, while creating evidence to use against me if I fought back. My next step was reaching out to my father privately. I knew that approaching him required delicate handling, given Ashley's success in convincing my parents that I was mentally unstable. I couldn't simply present evidence and expect immediate belief. I needed to plant seeds of doubt that would make Dad willing to investigate Ashley's claims independently. I called Dad during his afternoon walk, a routine he'd maintained since his heart attack recovery. Dad, I know you're concerned about me, and I understand why Ashley's recordings would be disturbing. I'm not asking you to believe me over her, but I am asking you to do one thing for me. What's that, son? Dad's voice was guarded but not hostile. Check the bank account for your medical expenses. Look at the withdrawal history for the past 6 months. Don't tell Ashley you're checking. Just look at where your money has been going. Jim, your sister, explained that there might be some confusion about those transactions. She said you might try to make accusations about the medical fund to distract from your own financial problems. Dad, I'm not asking you to take my word for anything. I'm asking you to look at your own bank statements. If Ashley's telling the truth about everything, then the medical fund should show only legitimate expenses for your care, right, Sia? There was a long pause. I suppose it wouldn't hurt to review the account activity, Dad said slowly. That's all I'm asking. Look at the transactions yourself. If everything checks out the way Ashley says it will, then you'll have confirmation that she's telling the truth. But if the transactions don't match medical expenses, then maybe we need to have a different conversation. That evening, Dad called me back. His voice was shaking with anger and disbelief. Jim, I found receipts for a spa day designer clothes, expensive dinners at restaurants I've never been to. Ashley has been using my medical money for her personal shopping. How much? I asked, though I already knew the approximate total. Nearly $2,000 over 4 months, money that was supposed to pay for my medications and therapy appointments. Dad's voice broke. I trusted her with my debit card because she said she was helping manage my medical expenses. Dad, the spa charges and shopping trips are just the beginning. Ashley has been lying about much more than the medical fund. Over the next hour, I walked Dad through Ashley's apartment scheme, the fake rent payments, the identity theft, and the edited recordings. I sent him copies of the credit card applications and the bank statements showing Ashley's fraudulent charges. Most importantly, I played him the recordings I'd captured of Ashley bragging about her manipulation. Dad listened in stunned silence as Ashley's voice came through the phone speaker describing her plan to destroy my reputation and take control of my life. When the recordings finished, Dad was quiet for a long time. I can't believe this, he finally said. I can't believe my own daughter would be capable of something like this. Dad, I know it's hard to accept, but Ashley has been planning this for months. She's not the person we thought she was. Jim, I owe you an apology, a huge apology. Your sister convinced me that you were having mental health problems and I chose to believe her over you. I should have investigated before making judgments. Dad's support was crucial, but I knew that exposing Ashley would require more than family reconciliation. I needed to gather evidence that would hold up to legal scrutiny and professional investigation. My research into Marcus Rodriguez revealed information that changed everything I thought I understood about Ashley's scheme. A background check through the county courthouse database showed that Marcus had been arrested twice in the past 5 years for fraud-related offenses. He'd been convicted of identity theft in Ohio and had spent 14 months in prison before moving to Springfield. Marcus wasn't just Ashley's boyfriend who happened to have influence over the apartment lease. He was a career criminal with expertise in exactly the types of fraud Ashley had been committing. The sophisticated fake bank statements, the convincing credit card applications, the careful timing of Ashley's scheme. None of it was Ashley's amateur work. She'd been partnered with someone who knew how to commit financial crimes professionally. Further investigation revealed that Marcus had been running similar scams on other tenants in his mother's rental properties. 3 families had been evicted over the past 2 years after Marcus and his associates created fake documentation suggesting lease violations or payment delinquencies. In each case, the properties were then rented to Marcus's friends at below-market rates. Ashley and Marcus weren't just stealing my apartment. They were part of a larger criminal operation that targeted vulnerable tenants throughout Springfield. My situation was one of many, though, perhaps the most elaborate because of the family connection that gave Ashley access to my personal information. The scope of their criminal enterprise was revealed when I discovered that Ashley and Marcus had been using my personal information to research my workplace contacts and financial relationships. They'd created fake social media profiles using my photos and information to friend coworkers, family members, and business associates. Through these fake profiles, they'd been gathering intelligence about my professional network and personal relationships. The plan extended far beyond stealing my apartment and destroying my credit. Ashley and Marcus intended to use my identity and professional connections to commit fraud against Romano's Italian kitchen, my bank, and potentially my family members. They'd been building toward a larger scheme that would have used my reputation and relationships as cover for extensive financial crimes. The evidence I gathered painted a picture of criminal conspiracy that went far beyond sibling rivalry or family conflict. Ashley hadn't simply gotten greedy and decided to steal my apartment. She'd partnered with a career criminal to commit identity theft fraud and conspiracy on a scale that could have destroyed dozens of lives. As I compiled the documentation that would expose Ashley and Marcus's crimes, I realized that my sister had made a fundamental miscalculation about my character. She'd assumed that my quiet nature and desire for family harmony meant I was weak and passive. She'd believed that I would accept her abuse rather than fight back effectively. Ashley was about to learn that sometimes the person who seems most vulnerable is actually the most dangerous opponent, because they have nothing left to lose and everything to gain from exposing the truth. The Springfield Police Department's Fraud Division occupied a cramped office on the second floor of the municipal building, where Detective Lisa Chen reviewed my evidence with the methodical attention of someone who'd seen every variation of family financial crime imaginable. I'd scheduled the appointment using Dad's name as a reference, knowing that Ashley's character assassination had potentially reached law enforcement through her edited recordings and false complaints. Mr. Thompson, Detective Chen said, spreading my documentation across her desk. This is one of the most comprehensive identity theft cases I've reviewed in my 5 years with the Fraud Division. Your sister and her associate have committed multiple felonies across several months. The credit card applications alone constituted 3 separate counts of identity theft. The forged bank statements represented fraud and conspiracy. Ashley's theft from Dad's medical fund added embezzlement charges. Marcus's role in the apartment scheme, combined with his criminal history, elevated the case to organized fraud conspiracy. What kind of timeline are we looking at for arrests? I asked. We'll need to coordinate with the prosecutor's office, but given the strength of your evidence and the ongoing nature of their crimes, I expect we can move quickly. However, I need to warn you that this process will likely destroy your family relationships permanently. Detective Chen's warning proved prophetic, but not in ways I'd anticipated. The investigation moved faster than expected because Ashley and Marcus had been careless about covering their tracks. Their confidence in my apparent powerlessness had led them to document their crimes extensively through text messages, emails, and financial records that provided ironclad proof of criminal conspiracy. The first break came when Detective Chen contacted Marcus's probation officer in Ohio. Marcus had violated his parole by moving to Springfield without notification, and by committing new fraud offenses. A warrant was issued for his immediate arrest, which meant police could take him into custody without the lengthy process typically required for financial crimes. Marcus was arrested at the apartment on a Tuesday morning while Ashley was at work. When police searched the premises with a warrant, they discovered a sophisticated fraud operation that extended far beyond my personal victimization. Marcus had been running identity theft schemes targeting elderly residents throughout Springfield, using information gathered through his mother's rental business. The evidence seized from the apartment included fake identification documents, credit card skimming devices, and detailed files on dozens of potential victims. Marcus had been using Ashley's relationship with Mia as cover for a much larger criminal operation that could have stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from vulnerable residents. Ashley's arrest came 6 hours later when she returned from work to find police cars surrounding the building. Her confident facade crumbled instantly when Detective Chen informed her that Marcus had already confessed to their conspiracy and provided detailed information about her role in the fraud schemes. Ashley Thompson, you're under arrest for identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit organized financial crimes, Detective Chen announced as Ashley's hands were cuffed behind her back. The sight of my sister being led away in handcuffs while her coworkers and neighbors watched from the street should have felt like victory. Instead, I felt a profound sadness for the person she could have been if she'd chosen differently. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived at the apartment an hour later, accompanied by her lawyer and a locksmith. The evidence against Marcus had made clear that she'd been manipulated by her son's criminal associates, and she was eager to distance herself from legal liability. Jim, I owe you a tremendous apology, Mrs. Rodriguez said, her voice heavy with regret. I should have verified Ashley's claims independently instead of trusting my son's judgment. Your lease will be restored immediately, and I'll provide a written statement for your insurance company about the fraudulent lease transfer. The financial restoration proved more complex, but ultimately successful. The credit card companies presented with evidence of identity theft and police reports documenting Ashley's crimes agreed to remove all fraudulent charges from my credit report. My credit score began recovering immediately, though the full restoration would take several months. Dad's medical fund was replenished through Ashley's bank accounts, which were frozen as part of the criminal investigation. The court ordered restitution for all stolen funds plus penalties and interest that would help cover Dad's future medical expenses. The most challenging aspect of the aftermath was confronting the family members who'd believed Ashley's lies about my mental state and financial irresponsibility. Mom's reaction was particularly painful when she realized how completely she'd been manipulated by her daughter. Jim, I don't know how to apologize for believing those terrible things about you, Mom said through tears during our first conversation after Ashley's arrest. She was so convincing, so detailed in her accusations. She made me believe that you were having a breakdown and that we needed to protect ourselves from your instability. Mom Ashley is very good at manipulation. She spent months planning this, and she knew exactly which buttons to push to make her lies believable. But I'm your mother, Mom replied, her voice breaking. I should have known better. I should have trusted my own son over the lies someone else was telling. The family healing process was complicated by Ashley's continued manipulation even from jail. She attempted to portray herself as a victim who'd been corrupted by Marcus's influence, claiming that she'd been coerced into participating in crimes she didn't understand. Her phone calls from jail, which were recorded and later played for the family, revealed her ongoing attempts to shift blame and minimize her responsibility. But the recordings I'd captured of Ashley bragging about her schemes made clear that she'd been an eager and intelligent participant in every aspect of the fraud conspiracy. Her claims of victimization were simply another layer of manipulation designed to minimize legal consequences and preserve family relationships. The criminal trial proceeded quickly because Marcus's cooperation and the extensive documentation made Ashley's guilt undeniable. She eventually accepted a plea agreement that included 18 months in prison, 5 years of probation, full restitution to all victims, and mandatory counseling for financial crimes. The workplace restoration required more delicate handling. Tony Rodriguez at Romano's had to navigate the complex situation of having fired an employee based on false accusations, while also acknowledging that he'd followed reasonable protocols for investigating workplace safety concerns. Jim, I want to offer you your position back with a formal apology and back pay for the time you were suspended, Tony said during our meeting to discuss my return. We'll also provide a letter of recommendation, acknowledging that the allegations against you were fabricated and that your character and work performance have always been exemplary. The return to Romano's was emotionally challenging because several coworkers had heard Ashley's lies about my mental state and financial problems. Some colleagues struggled to reconcile the responsible, stable Jim they'd known for 3 years with the unstable person Ashley had described. Carlos, the head chef who'd shown concern during my worst days, pulled me aside during my first week back. "Man, I had no idea what you were dealing with. Your sister really had everyone convinced that you were falling apart. I'm glad you found a way to fight back and clear your name." The investigation revealed that Ashley and Marcus had been planning to expand their fraud operation to target my professional network at Romano's. They'd intended to use my employment information and workplace relationships to commit financial crimes against the restaurant, its suppliers, and my co-workers. My suspension from work had actually disrupted their timeline and contributed to their eventual exposure. The complete scope of Ashley's betrayal became clear during the restitution proceedings, when investigators tallied the full extent of financial and personal damage she'd caused. Beyond the direct theft of money and destruction of my credit, Ashley had attempted to destroy my professional reputation, my family relationships, and my housing stability. Her scheme had been designed to leave me financially ruined, socially isolated, and psychologically broken. But Ashley had fundamentally misunderstood the person she was targeting. The same qualities that made me vulnerable to her manipulation, my loyalty to family, my desire to avoid conflict, my tendency to trust people I loved, also made me formidable when finally motivated to fight back. The person who'd worked 2 jobs to support his family and taken out a loan to save his father's life wasn't going to surrender his future without exposing every lie and crime Ashley had committed. As I stood in my restored apartment looking at the bedroom that was finally mine again and the possessions that had been returned by court order, I realized that Ashley's betrayal had taught me something valuable about the nature of family loyalty and personal strength. Sometimes the people who know you best are the ones capable of hurting you most deeply, but sometimes they're also the ones who most underestimate your ability to fight back when you have nothing left to lose. 6 months after Ashley's sentencing, I received a letter from the Springfield County Correctional Facility written in her familiar handwriting. The envelope felt thin, containing just a single sheet of paper, but I hesitated before opening it. Ashley's ability to manipulate through words had been her most dangerous weapon, and I wasn't certain I wanted to expose myself to whatever emotional manipulation she might attempt from prison. The letter surprised me with its simplicity and apparent honesty. "Jim, I know you have every reason to ignore this letter and never speak to me again. I know that nothing I say can undo the damage I've caused or justify the way I betrayed your trust. I'm writing this not because I expect forgiveness, but because I finally understand how wrong I was about everything. The counseling they require here has helped me see that my resentment toward you wasn't really about you at all. I was jealous of your independence, your work ethic, your ability to take care of yourself and others. Instead of trying to build my own life, I decided to tear down yours because it seemed easier than admitting I'd wasted years feeling sorry for myself. I want you to know that Marcus never coerced me into anything. I was an eager participant in everything we did because I convinced myself you didn't deserve the life you'd built. I was wrong about that, just like I was wrong about everything else. I don't expect you to write back or visit me. I just wanted you to know that I take full responsibility for my choices, and I'm genuinely sorry for the pain I caused you and our family." The letter was signed simply Ashley, without her usual elaborate signature or decorative flourishes. Something about its straightforward tone suggested genuine reflection rather than calculated manipulation. though I'd learned to be cautious about trusting Ashley's apparent sincerity. Dad's perspective on Ashley's incarceration had evolved significantly over the 6 months since her sentencing. Initially, he'd struggled with guilt about his daughter's imprisonment and anger about her betrayal of the family. The counseling sessions we'd attended together had helped him process the complex emotions surrounding Ashley's crimes and the manipulation that had turned him against his son. I keep thinking about how she used my heart attack as an opportunity to steal money and hurt you, Dad said during one of our weekly dinners at Romano's, where Tony had given us a regular table in recognition of my return to the restaurant family. She saw my medical crisis as a chance to advance her own schemes rather than an opportunity to help her family heal. Dad Ashley's problem wasn't lack of opportunity to do the right thing. Her problem was that she'd convinced herself that doing the wrong thing was justified because life hadn't given her what she felt she deserved. Our family dinners had become important rituals for rebuilding relationships damaged by Ashley's manipulation. Mom still struggled with guilt about believing Ashley's lies, but she'd channeled that remorse into positive action by volunteering with a local organization that helped identity theft victims navigate the recovery process. I meet people every week who've been through situations similar to yours, Mom told me during one dinner. The financial damage is often the least serious part of identity theft. The real harm is the way it destroys trust between family members and friends. I want to help other families avoid the mistakes I made. Mom's volunteer work had given her insight into how common family financial fraud actually was, and how sophisticated manipulators could be in creating false narratives that turned loved ones against each other. Her experience with Ashley's deception had made her an effective counselor for other parents struggling to understand how their children could betray family trust so completely. The workplace recovery had exceeded my expectations in ways that demonstrated Romano's genuine commitment to supporting employees who faced personal crises. Tony had not only restored my position and provided back pay, but he'd also recommended me for a promotion to assistant general manager that came with increased responsibility and a significant salary increase. Jim, the way you handled this situation showed leadership qualities we hadn't fully recognized before, Tony explained during the promotion meeting. You gathered evidence, methodically worked with law enforcement professionally, and returned to work with no bitterness toward colleagues who initially believed false accusations. Those are exactly the qualities we need in management. The promotion allowed me to move to a larger apartment in a better neighborhood while maintaining the financial stability I'd worked so hard to achieve. More importantly, it demonstrated that Ashley's attempt to destroy my professional reputation had ultimately failed completely. Marcus Rodriguez received a 5-year prison sentence due to his extensive criminal history and his role as the leader of the fraud conspiracy. His cooperation with prosecutors had been motivated entirely by self-interest rather than genuine remorse, and his attempts to minimize his responsibility had impressed no one involved in the legal proceedings. Mrs. Rodriguez had sold her rental properties and moved to Florida to escape the shame of her son's crimes and her own poor judgment in trusting his business advice. Before leaving Springfield, she'd provided a written apology and a positive reference letter acknowledging my reliability as a tenant and the injustice I'd suffered through her family's manipulation. The financial recovery had progressed better than Detective Chen had initially projected. The restitution payments from Ashley's bank accounts had fully restored Dad's medical fund, and the credit card companies had not only removed all fraudulent charges, but had also provided compensation for the time and stress involved in disputing the false accounts. My credit score had recovered to its previous level within 4 months, allowing me to purchase a reliable used car and establish a solid emergency fund for the first time in my adult life. The experience had taught me valuable lessons about financial security and the importance of monitoring credit reports regularly. The most significant change in my life was the deeper appreciation I'd developed for authentic relationships, built on honesty and mutual respect. Ashley's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also clarified which people in my life could be trusted during difficult times and which relationships were worth preserving through conflict. Carlos at Romano's had become a genuine friend, rather than simply a coworker, and his support during my worst days had demonstrated the value of workplace relationships, built on shared respect rather than convenience. Dad and I had developed a closer relationship based on honest communication about difficult topics, including our mutual recognition that we'd both enabled Ashley's entitled behavior in different ways. The most unexpected positive outcome was the romantic relationship that developed with Sarah Chen detective Lisa Chen's younger sister, whom I'd met during the legal proceedings. Sarah worked as a financial counselor helping people recover from fraud and identity theft, and our shared understanding of financial crime's psychological impact had created a foundation for genuine connection. "You know what I admire about how you handled your situation," Sarah said during one of our early dates. "You didn't let Ashley's betrayal make you bitter or suspicious of everyone. You fought back against her specifically while maintaining your ability to trust other people." Sarah's observation highlighted something important about resilience in the face of betrayal. Ashley's crimes had been specifically targeted and personally motivated, but they didn't reflect the character of most people or the potential for most relationships. Learning to distinguish between justified caution and defensive cynicism had been crucial for moving forward positively. Ashley's release date was still 12 months away, and I remained uncertain about whether I wanted to rebuild any relationship with her after her incarceration ended. The letter from prison suggested genuine remorse, but Ashley's history of manipulation made it difficult to trust her apparent transformation. Time would reveal whether her reflection was sincere or simply another performance designed to achieve her goals. What I did know was that Ashley's betrayal had inadvertently strengthened my life in ways she never could have anticipated. The crisis had forced me to develop skills in investigation, legal advocacy, and personal resilience that served me well beyond the specific situation. It had deepened my relationship with Dad, clarified my professional strengths, and introduced me to Sarah, who had become an important part of my future plans. The experience had also taught me that sometimes the most valuable life lessons come through surviving the worst betrayals. Ashley had intended to destroy my confidence, my relationships, and my future prospects. Instead, her attacks had revealed inner strength I hadn't known I possessed and had connected me with people who valued integrity and perseverance. Standing in my new apartment on a Sunday morning, reading Ashley's letter while drinking coffee and planning another week of work I enjoyed with people I respected, I realized that her attempt to steal my life had ultimately forced me to build a better one. The person who emerged from Ashley's betrayal was stronger, wiser, and more appreciative of authentic relationships than the person who had existed before her schemes began. Ashley's final lesson, delivered unintentionally through her own criminal behavior, was that sometimes the people who try hardest to destroy you end up teaching you the most about your own capacity for survival and growth. Sometimes the worst betrayal becomes the foundation for the best transformation if you're willing to fight for the truth and refuse to let someone else's dysfunction define your future. The deep life lesson that emerged from this painful experience was that loyalty and love within families must be balanced with accountability and truth. Enabling destructive behavior in the name of family harmony ultimately serves no one's interests and prevents the personal growth that comes through facing consequences for harmful choices. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to participate in their lies, even when exposing the truth causes temporary pain for everyone involved. Real strength isn't about avoiding conflict or maintaining peace at any cost. Real strength is about standing up for truth when it matters most, fighting back against injustice even when the odds seem impossible, and refusing to let someone else's betrayal destroy your capacity for trust, growth, and authentic connection with people who deserve your respect. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and standing up for the truth? How did you find the courage to fight back when someone you trusted was trying to destroy your life? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and finding strength in difficult situations. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's possible to fight back and win when everything seems lost. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that even in your darkest moments, you have more strength than you realize.